11. 118. 6 Hope 13. 6. 62. 12 row 2. 6. 69. 22, 23 row 11. 9, 10. 78. 24 Joe 6. 31. 94. 11 1 Co 3. 20. 95. 7-11 Heb 3. 7-11, 15. 4. 3-7. 102. 25-27 Heb 1. 10-12. 104. 4 Heb 1. 7. 112. 9 2 Co 9. 9. 116. 10 2 Co 4. 13. 144. 3 Heb 2. 6, and others. With reference to himself David wrote, "The Spirit of Jehovah it was that spoke by me, and his word was upon my tongue." 2 Sa 23. 2 Such inspiration is confirmed by the Apostle Peter Act 1. 15, 16, by the writer of the letter to the Hebrews Heb 3. 7, 8. 4. 7, and by other first-century Christians Act 4. 23-25. Most outstanding is the testimony of the Son of God. Luke 20. 41-44 After his resurrection, he said to his disciples, "These are my words which I spoke to you while I was yet with you, that all the things written in the law of Moses and in the prophets and Psalms, the first book of the hagiographer, or holy writings, and hence designating this entire section about me, must be fulfilled." Luke 24. 44. Messiah's experiences and activities foretold. An examination of the Christian Greek scriptures reveals that much was foretold in the Psalms concerning the activities and experiences of the Messiah, as the following examples will demonstrate. When presenting himself for baptism, put the Urim and the Thummim in the breastpiece. While the Hebrew preposition here translated and can be rendered upon, the same word is used at Exodus 25. 16 in speaking of placing the 2 stone tablets in the Ark of the Covenant. Ex 31. 18 Some have proposed the suggestion that the Urim and the Thummim were the 12 stones affixed to the breastpiece. That it was not the case is shown by the fact that, in the priestly inauguration ceremony, the completed breastpiece with the 12 stones sewn on it, was put upon Aaron, and then the Urim and Thummim were put in it. Also, a comparison of Exodus 28. 9, 12, 30 refutes the theory that they consisted of the 2 onyx stones on the shoulder pieces of the high priest's ephod. Ex 28. 9-14 They evidently were separate objects. Their use. It is notable that the Urim and the Thummim were to be over Aaron's heart when he went in before Jehovah, doubtless referring to Aaron's standing in the holy before the curtain to the most holy compartment when inquiring of Jehovah. Their location, over Aaron's heart, would appear to indicate that the Urim and the Thummim were placed in the fold, or pouch, formed by the doubled construction of the breastpiece. They were for the judgments of the sons of Israel and were used when a question of importance to the national leaders and consequently to the nation itself needed an answer from Jehovah. Jehovah, Israel's lawgiver, would give an answer to the high priest as to the right course to pursue in any matter. Ex 28. 30. David called upon Abiathar to employ the Urim and the Thummim when Abiathar, after escaping the slaughter of the priests of Nob in which his father died, came to David with the ephod. Apparently it was the ephod of the high priest. 1 Sa 22. 19, 20. 23. 6-15. May have been lots. From the instances recorded in the scriptures in which Jehovah was consulted by Urim and Thummim, it appears that the question was so framed that a yes or no answer, or at least a very brief and direct reply, could be given. In one instance 1 Sa 28. 6 The Urim is mentioned alone, evidently with the Thummim also understood to be included. A number of Bible commentators believe O textoi acute miritra longo utensils 1144 served to link kingdom with priesthood. The Aaronic priesthood is referred to in Deuteronomy 33. 8-10, which says, "Your Thummim and your Urim belong to the men loyal to you." The reference to these as belonging to the men loyal to Jehovah perhaps alludes to the loyalty of the tribe of Levi from which the Aaronic priesthood came, that was demonstrated in connection with the incident of the golden calf. X 32. 25-29. Jehovah wisely provided the Urim and the Thummim and placed them in the hands of the high priest. This made the king dependent to a great extent on the priesthood, avoiding the concentration of too much power in the hands of the king. It brought about the necessity of cooperation between the kingships that might ferment. Lot 2. 1-16. Drink offerings. Drink offerings were presented along with most of the other offerings, especially after the Israelites had settled in the Promised Land. New 15. 2, 5, 8-10. This consisted of wine intoxicating liquor and was poured out on the altar. New 28. 7, 14. Compare X 30. 9. New 15. 10. The Apostle Paul wrote to the Christians at Philippi, "If I am being poured out like a drink offering upon the sacrifice and public service to which faith has led you, I am glad." Here he used the figure of a drink offering, expressing his willingness to expend himself in behalf of fellow Christians. PHP 2. 17. Shortly before his death, he wrote to Timothy, "I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the due time for my releasing is imminent." 2T4. 6. Wave offerings. In the wave offerings the priest evidently put his hands under the hands of the worshipper, who was holding the sacrifice to be presented, and waved them to and fro. Or the thing offered was waved by the priest himself. Lot 23. 11a. It seems that Moses, as mediator of the law covenant, did this for Aaron and his sons when consecrating them to the priesthood. Lot 28, 29. This action represented a presenting of the sacrificial things to Jehovah. Certain wave offerings went to the priests as their portion. X 29. 27. The presentation of a sheaf or oma measure text to acute miritra longo. Jehovah's law given to Israel prohibited the making of images for worship. The true God is a spirit, and the making of any image to represent him is grossly inappropriate. In contrast, many images of the gods of other ancient nations have been unearthed. They were nothing more than the product of the hands of man, wood and stone. Therefore, 28. They were valueless gods, as the Bible says, having neither eyes to see nor ears to hear those who worship them. 1ch 16. 26. PS 115. 4-8. Today they are merely museum relics. Nevertheless, they reveal much about the roots of religious beliefs that are widespread today. Gods of the nation's religious triads began in Babylon. This stone tablet portrays a shrine of the Babylonian sun god Shamash, along with symbols of one such triad. The moon for the god Sin, the sun for Shamash, and a star for Ishtar-Shah, the chief god of the Assyrians, is portrayed on this ancient seal as having 3 heads above the wings. The Egyptians worshipped triads such as these: Top, Horus, Osiris, and Isis. Right. Isis, Horus, Nothis, much like Christendom's Madonna and Child, Egypt's mother sun image Isis. Figurative use. Salt is often used in the Bible figuratively. Jesus told his disciples, "You are the salt of the earth, a preserving influence on others, preventing spiritual putrefaction and moral decay." The good news they carried would preserve life. However, he went on to say to them, "But if the salt loses its strength, how will its saltness be restored? It is no longer usable for anything but to be thrown outside to be trampled on by men." Mount 5. 13. Mr. 9. 50. Lu 14. 34, 35. One Bible commentator remarks on Matthew 5. 13. The salt used in this country United States is a chemical compound, myriad of soda. And if the saltness were lost, or it were to lose its savor, there would be nothing remaining. It enters into the very nature of the substance. In Eastern countries, however, the salt used was impure, mingled with vegetable oil. Text to acute miritra longo. Salt c. 843. A life of sin, or who are responsible for so stumbling others. Mr. 9. 42-49. Using the term to convey a different sense, Jesus thereafter said, "Have salt in yourselves, and keep peace between one another." Mr. 9:50. The Apostle Paul used it in a similar way, saying, "Let your utterance be always with graciousness, seasoned with salt, so as to know how you ought to give an answer to each one." Col 4:6. One's conduct and speech should always be in good taste, considerate, wholesome, and tend toward preserving the lives of others. Salt, city of a Judean city in the wilderness. Jos 15:61-62. It is identified with Kpukmer and Horvetkmer and, about 20 kilometers 13 mi of Jerusalem, by the NW shore of the Dead Sea. Salt, valley of a valley where, on 2 occasions, the Israelites defeated the Edomites. 2 13. 2 Kai 14:7. Its precise location is uncertain, but scholars have generally recommended either of 2 locations, one near Beersheba and the other to the east of the Salt Sea. East from Beersheba in the Negev is a valley, the Arabic name of which Wadi al-Mil means Valley of Salt. The location is one where Judeans from the En and Edomites coming from this might conceivably meet in combat. However, some scholars, preferring a location in Edom's territory, identified the scriptural Valley of Salt with the plain SSW of the Salt Sea. At present, the lowlands of the Salt Sea is quite marshy and hardly a location that would be chosen for a battle. But, since the level of the Salt Sea has risen, the plain may have been more firm at the time the battles occurred, or the fighting could have begun in a portion of the valley where the ground was not marshy. However, 2 Thessalonians 1:6-10 indicates that this is not all that is involved. It speaks of the revelation of the Lord Jesus as bringing judicial punishment on those judged adversely by God, doing so at the time he comes to be glorified in connection with his holy ones. See Revelation. Since Paul says that the creation is waiting for this revealing, and will then be set free from enslavement to corruption and have the glorious freedom of the children of God, it is apparent that others aside from these heavenly sons of God receive benefit from their revelation in glory. Row 8. 19-23. The Greek term rendered creation can refer to any creature, human or animal, or to creation in general. Paul refers to it here as being in eager expectation, as waiting, as subjected to futility, though not by its own will, as being set free from enslavement to corruption in order to have the glorious freedom of the children of God, and as groaning together even as the Christian sons groan within themselves. These expressions all point to text to a acute muritra longo, son s of God 1000 Jesus, gain eventual sonship in God's universal family. In speaking of the future system of things and the resurrection from the dead to life in that system, Jesus said that these become God's children by being children of the resurrection. Luke 20:34-36. From all the foregoing information it can be seen that sonship of humans in relation to God is viewed from several different aspects. In each case, then, the sonship must be viewed in context to determine what it embraces and the exact nature of the filial relationship. Christ Jesus, the Son of God. The Gospel account by John particularly emphasizes Jesus' pre-human existence as the Word and explains that the Word became flesh and resided among us, and we had a view of his glory, the glory such as belongs to an only begotten Son from a Father. Joe 1:1-3:14. That his sonship did not begin with his human birth is seen from Jesus' own statements, as when he said, "What things I have seen with my Father I speak." Joe 8:38-42. Compare Joe 17:5-24, as well as from other clear statements of his inspired apostles. Row 8:3. 4. 1 Joe 4:9-11-14. Only begotten. Some commentators object to the translation of the Greek word mo-ge-net by the English only begotten. They point out that the latter portion of the word ge-net does not come from general naro beget, but from ge numbers kind, hence the term refers to the only one of a class or kind. Thus many translations speak of Jesus as the only Son rs. At JB rather than the only begotten Son of God. Joe 1:14. 3. 16, 18. 1 Joe 4. Place, or time of Lazarus' death after his resurrection. See resurrections before ransom was given. There is no biblical statement nor any reason to link the historical Lazarus with the beggar of Jesus' illustration of the rich man and Lazarus. 2. The name given to the beggar in Jesus' illustration commonly known as the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. Luke 16. 19-31 In the Vulgate the word rich has been rendered by the Latin adjective dives, which is often mistakenly used as the proper name of the rich man. However, the Jewish name Lazarus itself was common in ancient times, a fact borne out by Ashuri inscriptions. In the parable, the Lazarus beggar, Lazarus, was put at the gate of the rich man, desiring to be fed with the things that fell from the rich man's sumptuous table. Lazarus subsequently died and was carried off by angels to the bosom position of Abraham, a place comparable to that occupied by a person in ancient times when he reclined in front of another on the same couch during a meal. Abraham had a conversation with the rich man, who had also died, was buried, and was in Hades, existing in torments. A great chasm that could not be crossed separated the rich man from Abraham and Lazarus. The rich man's request that Abraham send Lazarus to his 5 brothers to give them a thorough witness, in the hope of sparing them the same experience, met with rejection on the grounds that these had Moses and the prophets, and, if unwilling to listen to them, neither will they be persuaded if someone rises from the dead. See illustrations. For Jesus' illustration of the rich man and Lazarus, did he draw on rabbinic beliefs concerning the dead? Teachers and students of comparative religion have in some cases suggested that in giving this illustration, Jesus Christ drew upon the ancient rabbinic concept and teaching regarding the underworld. Josephus furnishes the following information regarding the then current view of the Pharisees in this regard. They believe that souls have power to survive death and that there are rewards. And o textoi acute muritra longo, laziness 227 laziness. Disinclination or aversion to effort or work. Idleness. Indolence. Slothfulness. Sluggishness. The Hebrew verb amidal.zal means be sluggish. JG 18. 9 The adjective related to this verb is translated lazy one. PR 6. 6 The Greek word omidal.k&emidal.ros means sluggish, slothful. Mount 25. 26. Row 12. 11 Into another term, no middle.throws, means sluggish, dull. Heb 5. 11. 6. 12. Jehovah and his Son, as the 2 greatest workers, hate laziness. Jesus said, My Father has kept working until now, and I keep working. Job 5. 17 Throughout God's word the lazy time, being on assigned duty twice a year. Evidently the entire priesthood served at festival seasons when thousands of sacrifices were offered by the people, as they did at the temple dedication. 1 Ch 24. 1-18, 31. 2 Ch 5. 11. Compare 2 Ch 29. 31-35. 30. 23-25. 35. 10-19. A priest might serve at other times as long as he did not interfere with the allotted services of the priests on assigned duty. According to rabbinic traditions, in the time of Jesus' earthly life, the priests were numerous, so that the service of the week was subdivided among the various families making up the division, each family serving 1 or more days according to their number. Probably considered the most honorable of the daily services was the burning of incense on the golden altar. This was done after the sacrifice was offered. During the burning of incense, the people would be gathered outside the sanctuary in prayer. Rabbinic tradition is that lots were drawn for this service, but that one who had previously officiated was not allowed to participate unless all present had performed the service before. The Temple, pages 135, 137, 138. If this is so, a priest would usually have the honor only once in a lifetime. It was this service that Zechariah was performing when the angel Gabriel appeared to him to announce that Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth would have a son. When Zechariah came out of the sanctuary, the crowd gathered there could discern by his appearance and his inability to speak that Zechariah had seen a supernatural sight in the sanctuary. Thus the event became public knowledge. Luke 1. 8-23. Each Sabbath day, it appears, the priests had the privilege of changing the showbread. It was also on the Sabbath that the priestly division for that week completed its service and the new course began duty for the following week. These and other necessary duties were performed by the priests without constituting a breaking of the Sabbath. Mount 12. 2-5. Compare 1 Sa 21. 6. 2 Chiotextoi acute miritra longo. Priest 687. Priest was also used occasionally to denote a lieutenant or chief minister or official. In the list of the chief officers serving under King David the record reads, "As for the sons of David, they became priests." 2 Sa 8. 18. Compare 2 Sa 20. 26. 1 Chi 4. 5. 1 Ch 18. 17. The Christian priesthood. Jehovah had promised that if Israel kept his covenant they would become to him a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. X 19. 6. However, the priesthood of Aaron's line was to continue only until the coming. 11. David desired morally clean hands so as to be able to worship before Jehovah's altar. PS 26. 6. On the other hand, Pilate vainly tried to clear himself of blood guilt in connection with the death of Jesus by washing his hands before the people. But in this way he really could not escape responsibility for Jesus' death, since he, not the howling mob, had the authority to determine the judgment. Mount 27. 24. The scribes and Pharisees o textoi acute miritra longo. Watchtower 1172. Watchtowers built for that purpose. 2 Chi 17. 9. 2 Ch 20. 24. Job 27. 18. Issa 1. 8. Siege forces attacking fortified places had watchmen or sentries to give their commanders military intelligence. Ja 51. 12. When King Saul was in the field camp with his army he also had personal watchmen whose responsibility was to look out for their king's welfare. 1 Sa 14. 16. 26. 15, 16. Watchmen were often stationed on the city walls and towers to observe those approaching before they got close. 2 Sa 18. 24-27. 2 Chi 9. 17-20. At times watchmen made their inspection rounds through the city streets as well. Ka 3. 3. 5. 7. Fearful persons, awake during the dangerous hours of the night, might repeatedly inquire of the watchman if all was well. Issa 21. 11, 12, and it was only natural for watchmen themselves to long for the daylight to come. PS 130. 6. Happy the city that, in addition to the watchman, had Jehovah watching over it. PS 127. 1. Figurative use. Jehovah raised up prophets who served as figurative watchmen to the nation of Israel. Ja 6. 17, and they, in turn, sometimes spoke of watchmen in a symbolic way. Issa 21. 6, 8. 52. 8. 62. 6. 09. 8. These prophet watchmen had the responsibility to warn the wicked of impending destruction, and if they failed to do so, they were held accountable. Of course, if the people were unresponsive and failed to heed the warning, their blood was upon themselves. S3. 17-21. 33. 1-9. An unfaithful prophet was about as worthless as a blind watchman or a voiceless dog. Issa 56. 10. Watchtower. A place of lookout or post of observation, often built on a city wall. Seed tower. Other watch. Jos 13. 24, 25. JG 11. 12-28. Geographic names. The ancient Hebrew names of many cities, mountains, and valleys have been lost, partly due to the occupation of Palestine by the Arabs for much of the time since 638 CE, but, since Arabic is the living language most closely related to Hebrew, it is possible in some instances to identify with considerable accuracy certain ancient places and sites of major events. Some common Arabic and Hebrew geographic terms that are helpful in relating places to biblical sites are given on the following page. Climatic conditions. Palestine's climate is as diversified as its topography. In the matter of some 160 kilometers 100 mi, from the Dead Sea to Mount Hermon, the contrasting extremes in altitude produce climatic conditions equivalent to those that are elsewhere spread over thousands of miles in latitude between the tropics and the Arctic. Mount Hermon is usually snow-capped mucho texto acute miritra longo, Pelu 571 spring, rain comes in March and April. 11. 14. Jo 2. 23. Zek 10. 1. Jos 5. 7. One of Palestine's great assets is the abundance of dew, especially through the rainless summer months, for without the heavy dews many of the vineyards and grazing lands would suffer greatly. Hag 1. 10. Zek 8. 12. The moisture-laden breezes blowing up from the Mediterranean and down from Mount Hermon account for much of the dew in Palestine. PS 133. 3. In certain areas the dew at night is so heavy that enough moisture is recovered by the vegetation to compensate for the losses during the heat of the day. Compare Job 29. 19. Of particular importance is the dew in the Negev and uplands of Gilead where rainfall is minimal. See dew. Plants and animals. The tremendous variety of trees, shrubs, and plants found in this small area of the earth has been a source of amazement among botanists, one of whom estimates that there are about 2,600 plant varieties growing there. The diversity in altitude, climate, and soil helps to account for this variety in flora, some plants being at home in the cold alpine, others in the torrid desert, and still others in the alluvial plain or the rocky plateau, each blooming and bearing seed in its season. Within comparatively short distances from one another are found hot weather palms and cold weather oaks and pines. Willows along the streams and tamarisks in the wilderness. This land is also famous for its cultivated vineyards, olive groves, fig orchards, and fields of wheat, barley, and millet. Other crops include peas, beans, lentils, eggplants, onions, and cucumbers, as well as cotton and flax. Modern visitors to this land are often disappointed unless it is springtime, when the country's Mount 1. 21. Lu 1. 31. This name points out that Jehovah is the source of salvation, accomplished through Jesus. For this reason we find the Father and the Son spoken of together in connection with salvation. 2. 11-13. 3. 4-6. Salvation is provided by Jehovah through Jesus Christ for all sorts of man. 1-4. 10. He saves them from sin and death. 8. 2. From Babylon the Great. 18. 2, 4. From this world under Satan's control. 17. 16. Col 1. 13. And from destruction and everlasting death. 7. 14-17. 21. 3, 4. A great crowd is shown at Revelation 7. 9, 10. Attributing salvation to God and to the Lamb. The ransom sacrifice is the basis for salvation, and o texto acute miritra longo, scales 874 according to the Masoretic text at 1 Chronicles 20. 3. In some cases it appears that copper-bladed saws with stone teeth were used to cut stone. But apparently an abrasive such as emery powder was sometimes put under the cutting edge of a saw having a copper or a bronze blade so as to facilitate the cutting of stone. Persecution of faithful pre-Christian witnesses of Jehovah was so severe at times that some were killed by being sawn asunder. Heb 11. 37, 38. According to tradition, wicked King Manasseh had Isaiah put to death in that extremely painful manner, though the scriptures do not say so. Scales. A number of Hebrew and Greek words are appropriately rendered scales. The expression has various meanings. Animal scales. Flattened, rigid plates forming part of the outer body covering of many fishes and reptiles. The law ruled us ceremonially clean for food everything that has fins and scales in the waters. Water animals lacking such could not be eaten. They were a loathsome thing. 11. 9, 10, 12. 14. 9, 10. Thus scales heb. Sim, plural of kasmiddle.qeseth were one of the easily recognizable signs as to whether a certain fish could be eaten. Though there are 4 types of fish scales, most common actinoid scales with a comb-like edge and cycloid scales with a rounded border. These are arranged in overlapping rows, forming a thin, light, and flexible covering. The same Hebrew word is used in Ezekiel 29:4, where the Egyptian pharaoh is symbolically described as what seems to be a crocodile. The entire body of a crocodile is covered with strong plates of horn set in its leathery skin. Job 41:15-17 apparently also refers to the scales as NW, Mev, refers to the Greek Septuagint at 1 Chronicles 10:13, which has added the words, "And Samuel the prophet answered him." Baggs to the commentary supports the view that is implied by these uninspired words in the Septuagint, but it adds, "Nevertheless the fathers, reformers, and earlier Christian theologians, with very few exceptions, assumed that there was not a real appearance of Samuel, but only an imaginary one." According to the explanation given by Ephraim Sirus, an apparent image of Samuel was presented to the eye of Saul through demoniacal arts. Luther and Calvin adopted the same view, and the earlier Protestant theologians followed them in regarding the apparition as nothing but a diabolical spectre, a phantasm, a diabolical spectre in the form of Samuel, and Samuel's announcement as nothing but a diabolical revelation made by divine permission, in which truth is mixed with falsehood. In a footnote 1 Samuel, pages 265, 266, this commentary says, thus Luther says, the raising of Samuel by a soothsayer or witch, in 1 Sam. XXVIII. 11:12, was certainly merely a spectre of the devil. Not only because the scriptures state that it was effected by a woman who was full of devils, for who could believe that the souls of believers, who are in the hand of God, were under the power of the devil, and of simple men, but also because it was evidently in opposition to the command of God that Saul and the woman inquired of the dead. The Holy Ghost cannot do anything against this himself, nor can he help those who act in opposition to it. Calvin also regards the apparition as only a spectre. It is certain, he says, that it was not really Samuel, for God would never have allowed his prophets to be subjected to such diabolical conjuring. For here is a sorceress calling up the dead from the grave. Does anyone imagine that God wished his prophet to be exposed to such ignominy? As if the devil had power over the bodies and souls of the saints which are in his keeping. The souls of the saints are said to rest in God, waiting for their happy resurrection. Besides, are we to believe that Samuel took his cloak with him into the grave? For all these reasons, it appears evident that the apparition o texto acute miritra longo, Spiritism 1029 ed against itself comes to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself will not stand. In the same way, if Satan expels Satan, he has become divided against himself. How, then, will his kingdom stand? Moreover, if I expel the demons by means of Beelzebub, by means of whom do your sons expel them? This is why they will be judges of you. Mount 12. 22-27. The Pharisees were forced to concede that superhuman power was needed to expel the demons from heaven as a certainty, saying, I began to behold Satan already fallen like lightning from heaven. Luke 10. 1, 17, 18. In Luke 11. 36 the Greek word for lightning pe refers to the light or flashing of a lamp. Like possibly from a root meaning take. A man of the tribe of Manasseh who is named third in the list of Shemaiah's sons. 1 ch 7. 19. Lily. The Hebrew term shan and its corresponding Greek equivalent krinon, both rendered lily, probably embrace a great variety of flowers, such as the tulips, anemones, hyacinths, irises, and gladioli. According to Kuhler and Baumgartner, the Hebrew designation is derived from an Egyptian word meaning big flower. Lexicon in Veteris Testamenti Libros, Leiden, o texto acute miritra longo, line 256 has been suggested that Jesus probably had the anemone in mind. However, he may simply have been referring to lily-like flowers in general, as may be inferred from the fact that lilies of the field is used in parallel with vegetation of the field. Mount 6. 28-30. Lu 12. 27, 28. The significance of the expressions the lily, the lilies, appearing in the superscriptions of Psalms 45, 60, 69, and 80, is not known. Lime. A substance, white when pure, that is prepared by burning forms of calcium carbonate such as limestone, shells, or bones. Am2. One abundant in the Mount Venus region of Palestine, limestone was converted into lime calcium oxide by burning fragments of limestone in conical or cylindrical lime kilns. In ancient times lime heb. Sid was a principal ingredient in mortar and was used for plastering walls and for whitewashing walls, graves, and so forth. La27. 4. S13. 10. Mount 23. 27. Act 23. 3. The Bible also uses the burnings of lime figuratively to represent destruction. Isla 33. 12. See kiln. Linen. The thread or cloth made from flax. X 25. 4. JG 15. 14. Among the Hebrews, most garments were either woolen or linen. La 13. 47. PR 31. 13, 22. Ho 2. 5, 9. A mixture of the two materials was prohibited by the law for non-priestly Israelite garments. De 22. 11. Other items made from linen included belts. J 13. 1. And sails. As 27. 72. And is truth. 119. 142. Lasting benefits result from observing his perfect law, trustworthy reminders, upright orders, clean commandments, and righteous judicial decisions. 19. 7-11. God's word serves to illuminate an individual's path. 119. 105. And his commandments make one wise, give insight and understanding. 119. 98-100, 104. Clarify and supplement other scriptures. At times the book of Psalms clarifies or supplements other parts of the Bible. It shows that afflicting one's soul, as was done by the Israelites on Atonement Day. 16. 29. 23. 27. New 29. 7. Pertains to fasting. PS 35. 13. The psalmist alone tells of the severe treatment accorded, at least initially, to Joseph while imprisoned in Egypt. With fetters they afflicted his feet, into irons his soul came. 105. 18. From the Psalms we learn that deputations of angels were involved in bringing the plagues upon Egypt. 78. 44-51. And that, in the wilderness, the miraculously provided water went through the waterless regions as a river. 105. 41. Thus providing an ample and readily accessible water supply for the nation of Israel and their many domestic animals. The Psalms furnish evidence that Pharaoh himself died in the Red Sea. 136. 15. The Psalms indicate that the Israelites experienced reverses and great hardship prior to the defeat of the Edomites in the Valley of Salt. PS 60. Sup. 1, 3, 9. This suggests that the Edomites invaded Judah while the nation was warring in the end with the forces of Aram-Naharaim and Aram-Zobah. Psalm 101 reveals David's manner of administering affairs of state. As his servants, David selected only faithful persons. He could not put up with arrogant individuals and did not tolerate slander. Daily he was concerned about bringing wicked ones to justice. Ptolemy's Tol-Ma is city of named for Ptolemy. Later name of Akko. The Apostle Paul stopped at this seaport city near Mount Carmel on his way to Jerusalem about 56 CE 21. 7. Akko. Papua. This name represents two similar Hebrew names that differ in gender and meaning, but that are spelled alike in both their Greek and English translations. 1. Pu-R. Second son of Issachar. 1 Ch7. 1. Sepulva. 2. Pu-R. A Hebrew midwife who, together with midwife Shiphrah, was commanded by Pharaoh to kill all males. Pursuing them is like striving after wind. EC 1. 14. 2. 11 And the man who brings ostracism upon his house takes possession of wind. He gains nothing that is worth while or his real substance. PR 11. 29. Winds scatter and toss objects about, and so being scattered to every wind or divided toward the four winds signifies complete dispersion or division. J 49. 36. As 5. 10. 12. 14. 17. 21. Da 11. For like a vessel that is tossed about by the winds, with no set course, persons lacking Christian maturity are subject to being carried hither and thither by every wind of teaching by means of the trickery of men, by means of cunning and contriving error. F4. 13, 14. Window. See house. Wine and strong drink. There are a number of original language terms that usually designate some kind of wine. Heb. T middle dot Rausch GE 27. 28, 37. Ho 2. 8, 9, 22. Heb. Chamurda 32. 14. Issa 27. 2 and its corresponding Aramaic term Kamada 5. 1, 2, 4, 23. As well as Gr. Glucosic 2. 13. But the Hebrew word yin is found most frequently in the scriptures. It first appears in Genesis 9. 20-24, where the reference is to Noah's planting a vineyard after the flood and then becoming intoxicated on the wine therefrom. The Greek word oimbos, basically corresponding to the Hebrew term yin, first occurs in Jesus' comments on the inadvisability of using old wineskins for new, partially fermented wine, as the pressure developed through fermentation would burst the old wineskins. Mount 9. 17. Mr. 2. 22. U5. 37, 38. Various strong alcoholic liquors, apparently derived from pomegranates, dates, figs, and the like, were usually designated by the Hebrew term shakar. New 28. 7. The 14. 26. PS 69. 12. The Hebrew word amidaldotzis, at the Song of Solomon 8. 2. Refers to the fresh juice of pomegranates, but in other passages the context points to wine. Isra 49. 26. Joe 1. 5b may have been designated by the Hebrew word sovethine. 36. 16. 3. Though circumcision was not a Christian requirement, had the half-Jew Timothy remained in an uncircumcised state, doubtless it would have prejudiced the Jews o textoi acute miritra longo. Paul 588. Trouble caused by Jews from Thessalonica obliged Paul to leave. Acts 16. 8. 17. 14. The brothers conducted the apostle to Athens. His preaching in the marketplace there led to his being taken to the Areopagus. His defense moved Dionysius, one of the judges of the court that convened there, and others to embrace Christianity. Acts 17. 15-34. Next Paul went to Corinth, taking up lodging with a Jewish couple, Aquila and Priscilla, and working with them for time as a tent maker. From Corinth, Paul apparently wrote his 2 letters to the Thessalonians. After teaching in Corinth for a year and a half and establishing a congregation, he was accused by the Jews before Gallio. But Gallio dismissed the case. Acts 18. 1-17. Later Paul sailed for Caesarea, first stopping at Ephesus and preaching there. From Caesarea the apostle went up and greeted the congregation, undoubtedly referring to the congregation at Jerusalem, and then went to Syria and Antioch. Acts 18. 18-22. Possibly earlier from Corinth, or perhaps now from Syria and Antioch, he wrote his letter to the Galatians. Third Missionary Journey. Map, Volume 2, p. 747. On his third missionary journey c. 5256 CE Paul revisited Ephesus, and labored there for some 3 years. From Ephesus he wrote his first letter to the Corinthians and, it appears, dispatched Titus to assist the Christians there. Following a riot instigated against him by the silversmith Demetrius, Paul left Ephesus and headed for Macedonia. Receiving news from Corinth through Titus, Paul, in Macedonia, composed his second letter to the Corinthians. Before leaving Europe with a contribution from the brothers in Macedonia and Achaia for the needy Christians in Jerusalem, and most probably when he was in Corinth, Paul wrote his letter to the Romans. Act 19. 1. 20. 4. Row 15. 25, 26. 2 Co 2. 12, 13. 7. 5-7. On his way to Jerusalem, Paul discoursed at Troas and raised the accidentally killed Eutychus to life. He also stopped at Miletus, where he met with the overseers of the Ephesus congregation, reviewed his own ministry in the district of Asia, and encouraged them to imitate his example. Act 20. 6-38. Arrest and enduring God. Here the word seed is the Greek word spomidal.ra, which denotes seed sown, hence in position to be reproductive. 1 P 3, 4, 18, 19, 23. In this manner Peter reminds his brothers of their relationship as sons, not to a human father who dies and who can transmit neither incorruptibility nor everlasting life to them, but to the living and enduring God. The incorruptible seed with which they are given this new birth is God's Holy Spirit, his active force, working in conjunction with God's enduring word, which is itself Spirit-inspired. The Apostle John likewise says of such Spirit-begotten ones, "Everyone who has been born from God does not carry on sin, because his reproductive seed remains in such one, and he cannot practice sin, because he has been born from God." 1 John 3. 9. This Spirit in them operates to generate a new birth as God's sons. It is a force for cleanness, and it produces the fruitage of the Spirit, not the corrupt works of the flesh. The person having this reproductive seed in himself will therefore not make a practice of the works of the flesh. The Apostle Paul comments on this matter. For God called us, not with allowance for uncleanness, but in connection with sanctification. So, then, the man that shows disregard is disregarding, not man, but God, who puts his Holy Spirit into you. 1 Th 4. 7, 8. However, one of these Spirit-begotten ones who constantly resists the Spirit or grieves it, that is, saddens it or hurts it, will eventually cause God to withdraw his Spirit. F4. 30, int. Compare Issa 63. 10. A person might go so far as to commit blasphemy against the Spirit, which would be calamitous for him. Mount 12. 31, 32. Lu 12. 10th. Therefore Peter and John stress the need to maintain holiness in the love of God, to love one's brothers from the heart, and to display submission to the guidance of the Spirit of God, thereby proving oneself a true, loyal son of God. 1 P 1. 14-16, 22. 1 Jo 2. 18, 19. 3. 10, 14. Seer? Evidently a man enabled by God to discern the divine will, one having such insight. O texto e acute miritra longo, celled 891, the first of the line of men called the prophets. Act 3. 24. 13. 20. See prophet. Scoob, high up. Protected. 1. Son of Hezron and father about it. Sun rising, sunset. The time when the sun appears to rise above the horizon, and the time when it disappears from view below the horizon. These times were pivotal points in the daily life of people in the biblical period. For most persons, the dawn opened the curtain on the day's activity and the dusk drew it closed again. As the psalmist wrote, the sun sets. You cause darkness, that it may become light. In it all the wild animals of the forest move forth. The manned young lions are roaring for the prey and for seeking their food from God himself. The sun begins to shine. They withdraw and they lie down in their own hiding places. Man goes forth to his activity and to his service until evening. How many your works are, O Jehovah? All of them in wisdom you have made. The earth is full of your productions. PS 104. 19-24. The rising of the sun marked the start of the natural daylight period and, when Jesus Christ was on earth, the start of the counting of the 12 hours of daylight. Mr. 16. 2. Joe 11. 9. Many, of course, were up before dawn, like the diligent woman of Proverbs 31. 15. Jesus, too, is mentioned as rising before the sun was up, to spend time in prayer. Mr. 1. 35. When sunrise came, the large city gates swung open, men went out to their fields or to the vineyards, women lined up at the wells for water, people filled the marketplaces, and fishermen pulled for shore to sell the night's catch, after which they would clean and mend their nets. The day's normal activities and labor went on until sundown. At its approach the men returned from their fields, their masters paid them their wages for the day, women carried their night's supply of water home, the city gates swung shut, and the watchmen began the first of the 4 night watches, while throughout the city oil lamps began to flicker in the homes. JG 19. 14-16. Now 20. 8-12. D 24. 15. GE 24. 11. NE 13. 19. Mr. 13. 35. For many, however, work went on after the evening meal, as industrious men and women did weaving or engaged in other indoor crafts. PR 31. 18, 19. 2th 8. At times Jesus and his apostles also continued their ministry and its related activity on into the night. Mount 14. 23-25. Mr. 1. 32-34. 4. 35-39. And drinking, mentioned in this account, are done in a figurative sense by exercising faith in Jesus Christ, as is indicated by verses 35 and 40. Furthermore, eating actual human flesh and blood would be cannibalism. Therefore, Jews who were not exercising faith and who did not properly understand Jesus' statement about eating his flesh and drinking his blood were shocked. This indicated the Jewish view on eating human flesh and blood, as inculcated by the law. Joe 6. 60. Additionally, drinking blood was a violation of God's law to Noah, prior to the law covenant. GE 9. 4. L 17. 10. The Lord Jesus Christ would never instruct others to violate God's law. Compare Mount 5. 19. Furthermore, Jesus commanded, "Keep doing this in remembrance of me, not in sacrifice of me." 1 Co 11. 23-25. The bread and the wine are, therefore, emblems, representing Christ's flesh and blood in a symbolic way, just as were his words about eating his flesh and drinking his blood. Jesus had said to those offended by his words, "For a fact, the bread that I shall give is my flesh in behalf of the life of the world." Joe 6. 51. This was given at his death as a sacrifice on the torture stake. His body was buried and was disposed of by his Father before it could see corruption. Act 2. 31. No one ever ate any of his flesh or blood, literally. Proper, orderly observance. The Christian congregation at Corinth had got into a bad spiritual state, in some respects, so that, as the Apostle Paul said, "Many among you are weak and sickly, and quite a few are sleeping in death." It was to great extent due to their misunderstanding of the Lord's evening meal and its significance. They were failing to respect the sacredness of the occasion. Some brought their supper with them to eat before or during the meeting. Among these were persons who overindulged and became intoxicated, while others in the congregation who had no supper were hungry and felt shamed in the presence of those who had much. With their minds drowsy or on other matters, they were not in condition to partake of the emblems with appreciation. Furthermore, there were divisions in the congregation over the fact that some in their midst favored Peter, others preferred Apollos, and yet others looked to Paul for leadership. 1 Co 1. 11-13. 11. 18. They were failing to appreciate that this occasion was one that should highlight unity. They did not have full realization of the seriousness of the matter, that the emblems represented the body and blood of the Lord and that the meal was in memory of his death. Paul emphasized the grave danger to those who partook without discerning these facts. 1 Co 11. 20-34. Lo Rama Lo Ru Middle. How Mashi was 18. It is Jehovah who prepared rain for the earth. PS 147. 8. Is 30. 23. He has divided a channel for the flood, perhaps referring to the way in which God causes clouds to channel rain down over certain parts of the globe. Job 38. 25-27. Compare PS 135. 7. J 10. 13. His ability to control rain in harmony with his purpose is one of the things that distinguished Jehovah from the lifeless idol gods worshipped by the nations surrounding Israel. J 14. 22. In the Promised Land the Israelites had even more reason to appreciate that than when they were in Egypt, where rain was very infrequent. J 11. 10, 11. In preaching to the Greeks in Lystra, Paul and Barnabas explained that the rain served as a witness about the living God and a demonstration of his goodness. Act 14. 14-17. The benefits of rain are felt not just by the good and righteous but by all people. So, Jesus pointed out, God's love in this regard should serve as a pattern for humans. Mount 5. 43-48. Rainfall in the Promised Land. A distinct feature of the climate of the Promised Land is its variety as to rainfall. Two chief factors determining the amount of rain are proximity to the sea and the land's elevation. The plains along the Mediterranean receive considerable rain during the rainy season, with the amount increasing as one goes from end to west. The rainfall tends to be greater in the hills and mountains, because the moisture carried eastward from the sea condenses more heavily there. The Jordan Valley lies in a rain shadow, for the air traveling over the mountains has by then given up much of its moisture, and the air is warmed as it moves into the valley. Yet, when this air meets the elevated plateau of the Jordan, clouds again form, resulting in some rainfall. This makes a strip of land of the Jordan suitable for grazing or limited agriculture. Farther is the desert, where the rain is too light and irregular to be useful for raising crops or for grazing herds. Seasons. The two primary seasons in the Promised Land, summer and winter, can rather accurately be viewed as the dry season and the rainy season. Compare PS 32. 4. K2. 11, FTN. From about mid-April to mid-October very little rain falls. Rain is rare in this period during which the harvest takes place. Proverbs 26. 1 shows that rain at harvest time was considered quite out of place. Compare 1 to 12. 17-19. During the rainy season the rain is not constant. It alternates with clear days. Since this is also the cold period, exposure to otextoi acute, the degraded practices of non-Jews and the disobedience of the Jews to God's law in no way brought harm to the Creator personally. Instead, his truthfulness, holiness, and righteousness stood out in sharp contrast, and this to his glory. But the fact that man's wrongdoing makes God's righteousness stand out in even greater prominence provides no basis for claiming that God is unjust in executing an adverse judgment against wrongdoers. Being a creation of God, a person has no right to harm himself by sinning. The above is the argument that Paul used in his letter to the Romans, saying, "If our unrighteousness brings God's righteousness to the fore, what shall we say? God is not unjust when he vents his wrath, is he? I am speaking as a man does. Never may that happen. How, otherwise, will God judge the world? Yet if by reason of my lie compare PS 62. 9 the truth of God has been made more prominent to his glory, why am I also yet being judged as a sinner? And why not say, just as it is falsely charged to us and just as some men state that we say, let us do the bad things that the good things may come. The judgment against those men is in harmony with justice. Row 3. 5-8 God has delivered his people, not for a course of sin, but for a life of righteousness, that they may glorify him. The apostle says later in his letter, neither go on presenting your members to sin as weapons of unrighteousness, but present yourselves to God as those alive from the dead, also your members to God as weapons of righteousness. Row 6. 12, 13. What is the meaning of the statement that Jesus Christ is himself the truth? Like his Father Jehovah, Jesus Christ is full of undeserved kindness and truth. Job 1. 14. F4. 21 While on earth, he always spoke the truth as he had received it from his Father. Job 8. 40, 45, 46 He committed no sin, nor was deception found in his mouth. 1 Peter 2. 22 Jesus represented things as they really